September 18, 1944, 0640 hours, near Aracourt, Lorraine, France. Dawn breaks through a cold, gray fog that hangs low over the rolling fields. The wet earth smells of diesel and cordite. Somewhere in the distance, artillery rumbles like an approaching storm. An American tank crew crouches beside their machine, hands wrapped around metal coffee cups, steam rising into the mist. The tank's engine ticks as it cools. Mud cakes the tracks. The white star on the hull is smeared with dust. Across the fields, barely visible through the haze, German armored silhouettes shift into position. A Panther tank revs its engine. Its commander watches through binoculars and smirks. "They send these little coffins against us," he mutters. His crew laughs. They've seen the Shermans burn. Thin armor, tall silhouettes, a gasoline engine that turns the inside into an inferno when hit. The Americans call them Ronsons, lights on the first strike. The Germans just call them easy kills. And today, the Germans believe they're about to slaughter another American armored push. They have no idea what's coming. The German 5th Panzer Army has spent days preparing these positions. Anti-tank guns are dug in. Panthers and Panzer IVs sit hull-down behind hedgerows and ridgelines. Infantry with Panzerfausts hide in tree lines and stone farmhouses. This is Lorraine, rolling farmland broken by forests, rivers, and narrow roads, a perfect killing ground. And for once, the Germans believe they finally have the advantage. Because the Americans are bringing Shermans. Inside one of those Shermans, Sergeant Bill Dawson grips the turret rim and peers into the fog. He's 23, from Kansas. His hands shake as he pulls on his gloves. His tank commander, Lieutenant Jack Monroe, stands half out of the hatch, binoculars pressed to his eyes. He can barely see 50 yards ahead. "Visibility's garbage," Monroe mutters. "They'll be waiting." Dawson nods. Everyone knows it. They've been fighting since Normandy. They've seen Panthers punch through Shermans at 1,000 yards. They've watched crews burn alive. They know what German 75 and 88 Michels can do. The Germans don't just outgun them. They outclass them. At least on paper. 5 miles behind the front, in a stone farmhouse turned command post, General George S. Patton stands over a map spread across a wooden table. Third Army has been racing east since breaking out of Normandy. France fell faster than anyone expected. German lines disintegrated. Entire divisions surrendered. But now they've hit real resistance. Fuel is short, ammunition is tight, and the Germans have finally stabilized their line in Lorraine. Patton jabs a finger at the map. "Aracourt," he says, "they think they can stop us here." His staff officers glance at each other. Major General John Wood, commander of the 4th Armored Division, stands nearby. Hard eyes, calm voice. "The Germans have Panthers in force," Wood says. "They're dug in. They want us to come straight at them." Patton smiles. "Then we'll do exactly that." A pause. But not the way they expect. Back at the front, the fog thickens. German tank commanders sit with engines idling, listening to the rumble of American armor somewhere out there in the mist. A Panther gunner rests his hand on the breech of his 75 cannon. He's confident. This gun can punch through a Sherman from over a mile away. His commander adjusts his headset. "Let them come," he says. They've been told the Americans rely on speed, not skill, that their tanks are built fast and cheap, that their crews are green. The Germans are veterans of Kursk, of Kharkov, of years of armored warfare. They are the masters of the battlefield. Or so they believe. Then the fog begins to lift. Slowly, just enough to see shapes. Movement. Engines. Columns of Shermans rolling forward in long lines, their silhouettes emerging from the mist like ghosts. The German commanders exchange looks. So predictable, one says. The Panthers adjust their turrets, rangefinders click into place, gunners track targets. A Panzer IV commander grins. This will be a massacre. Inside Lieutenant Monroe's Sherman, the radio crackles. All units, this is Red 1. Advance on phase line Baker. Artillery prep in 30 seconds. Dawson swallows. 30 seconds, he whispers. Monroe lowers himself into the turret and seals the hatch. The tank lurches forward. Tracks bite into wet earth. Engines roar across the line. Dozens of Shermans roll out of the fog, forming attack wedges, exactly as German doctrine predicts. Exactly as the Germans want. In a German observation post on a ridgeline, a major watches through a scope. "Here they come," he says calmly. His adjutant picks up the phone to report to Corps headquarters. "American armor advancing as expected. We are about to engage." There is confidence in his voice. Too much confidence. Because behind those advancing Shermans, hidden in the mist, is something the Germans did not expect. Hundreds of artillery tubes. Forward observers already dialing in coordinates. Tank destroyer battalions maneuvering into flanking positions. Radio nets buzzing with precision timing. And somewhere in the rear, Patton's plan is unfolding with ruthless speed. The Germans think they're about to destroy a reckless American charge. They don't realize they're walking into a trap built on speed, coordination, and overwhelming fire. A trap that will turn mockery into terror, and turn Lorraine into one of the most devastating armored ambushes of the war. The first Sherman crests the ridge. A Panther gunner squeezes the trigger. The battlefield holds its breath. And then the fog explodes with fire. The first shells scream across the field, not from the Shermans, they're moving fast, but from invisible American artillery zeroed in with deadly precision. You can almost hear the German crew's confidence crack. The Panthers 75 fires a shell punching through a Sherman's side. Smoke erupts, crew screams, flames lick the turret. For a split second, the Germans think the pattern is working. The Ronson is down, easy victory. Then it happens again and again. Sherman after Sherman rolls forward, wedges of green-painted steel slamming into the German line. But they're not advancing blindly. Tanks peel to the left, to the right, hugging hedgerows, darting between craters and shell holes. Infantry huddles behind them, moving in perfect coordination. Engineers follow, ready to breach mines and obstacles. Artillery fires just ahead, suppressing every German bunker and gun pit. The Germans laugh at first. "Cheap little tanks," one Panzer commander mutters. "We'll flatten them in minutes." Minutes stretch into eternity. The Panzer IVs open fire again, but Shermans pivot, move off axis, and fire back with .50 cal turrets and 75 guns. The German armor begins to feel the pressure. Their formation fractures under a hail of steel and smoke. Lieutenant Monroe feels it. Adrenaline hits like a hammer in his chest. The hedgerow ahead is torn apart by artillery bursts. Shermans pivot into it, and suddenly, flanking fire begins from positions the Germans didn't even see. The first Panther that tried to take a shot is hit from the side. It flips, catches fire, and slides into a muddy ditch. The German crew abandons it, shouting orders into the fog. More Panther tanks are targeted in sequence, each hit exposing their weaknesses, each explosion a crack in the German morale. From their ridgeline observation post, German majors are shouting into radios, calling for reinforcements. Nothing arrives. Patton's columns have cut off the roads, and flanking units are holding every escape route. The perfectly rehearsed German defense is crumbling. Somewhere in the chaos, Sergeant Dawson peeks over his turret hatch. He sees the Panzer IVs trying to reorient. Smoke, fire, mud flying, men running across fields. The battlefield is a violent ballet, and he realizes this is not just a push. This is annihilation. The Germans are no longer laughing. Their mockery has turned to confusion, then fear. They can see it in each other's eyes. What they called a toy has become a weapon they never anticipated. A German officer grabs his map. Every line of defense he painstakingly drew is being shredded. "This cannot be," he whispers. Orders are shouted, tanks reposition, infantry digs in deeper, but Patton's columns move like a living organism. Nothing is static, everything adapts. And the Shermans, they keep coming. Somehow these inferior machines, manned by 20-year-olds and brave officers, have turned Lorraine into a nightmare. Artillery coordination, flanking maneuvers, rapid advancement, it's textbook execution on steroids. And in every explosion, every overturned tank, the Germans' confidence drains faster than their fuel. The first cries of retreat ripple through the line. Units break from their positions. Soldiers fire sporadically, then drop back under the relentless pressure. The Germans realize too late they are being enveloped. Their well-laid defensive plan is now a trap for them. And above the roar of engines and fire, you can almost hear the laughter die, replaced by panic. Somewhere near a ruined farmhouse, a young German lieutenant crouches behind rubble. Sweat and smoke mix on his face. He can see the Americans moving faster than anything he's trained to anticipate. How can they do this?" he whispers. Behind him, the commander of the Panzer battalion is trying to call in artillery support. The radio is dead. Communications are jammed. Every line of defense is compromised. The Lorraine fields, once a canvas of German preparation, have become a corridor of American mastery. Patton's armored spearheads are slicing through, and the Germans are running out of time. And Patton, he watches from the command post miles away, cigar dangling, eyes scanning the map. He knows the German morale is breaking. He knows the panic will spread. He knows this is the moment when mockery turns to disbelief and then to fear. The American tanks surge forward. Smoke, fire, and mud fly in every direction. The first crack in the German lines widens. A panzer commander screams into his headset, fall back now." But retreat isn't simple. Roads are blocked, mines litter the fields, and everywhere Shermans press forward, relentless, unstoppable. And just like that, the battlefield has turned. The Germans who laughed at the American tanks hours ago are now running for their lives, desperately trying to salvage anything from the chaos. A young American driver keeps his eyes on the horizon. Ahead, more Panther and Panzer IV hulks smolder in the mist. Behind, his unit is advancing with precision. The smell of diesel, smoke, and wet earth fills his lungs. Victory is near. But the worst for the Germans, they don't yet know the full extent of what Patton has planned for the next day. The panic is only the beginning. By late morning, Lorraine's fields are unrecognizable, trenches torn apart, hedgerows flattened, burned-out tanks lie like broken toys in mud-churned furrows. Smoke curls into the sky, carrying the stench of gasoline and scorched metal. The Germans are no longer in control. They are fleeing through chaos they cannot navigate. From a vantage point on a small ridge, General Patton watches his map, then lifts his binoculars. Columns of Sherman tanks continue to roll forward, wedges widening, engines growling like beasts. Artillery observers call in strikes with pinpoint accuracy, and infantry follows as if dancing to a single rhythm. Every German attempt to regroup is anticipated and countered. Across the battlefield, the German officer's confidence has dissolved into desperation. Major Heinrich Krauss of the 5th Panzer Army grips his helmet as reports flood in. Panzer IVs destroyed, Panthers immobilized, infantry pinned under relentless artillery fire. Communications break down. Orders go unanswered. Entire companies vanish into the fog. A Panther tank commander, Feldwebel Otto Müller, yells at his crew to hold position, but his men are already abandoning their post. Explosions erupt in the distance as Shermans flank from unexpected directions. Smoke from burning vehicles fills their vision. Every second they linger, more Shermans appear over the horizon. The Americans are everywhere, and they are coordinated. Lieutenant Monroe's Sherman pushes through a muddy crossroads. Dawson keeps watch, scanning for movement. The smell of cordite burns his nostrils. Shadows of fleeing German infantry dash between destroyed tanks and broken hedgerows. Sherman after Sherman cuts through the chaos, machine guns rattling, 75 cannons barking. The Germans cannot stop them. At the command post, Patton's staff is alive with controlled chaos. Maps are constantly updated. Forward units report progress, coordinates are adjusted. Patton doesn't just watch, he predicts. He knows where the Germans will try to retreat. He positions units to intercept, to trap. It's a chess game played at a scale and speed the Wehrmacht cannot match. By midday, entire German divisions are in disarray. Units that were considered elite, the very pride of the Wehrmacht, are now fragmented. The once laughing commanders are shouting into radios, their voices rising in panic. They attempt to form defensive lines on the fly, but the Americans are already past them. Any hope of regrouping is evaporating. Even the Panthers, once symbols of German armored superiority, are falling one by one. Shermans, moving in wedges, target the flanks, exploiting weak spots the Germans never anticipated. Artillery barrages tear into the hedgerows and farmhouses where infantry was supposed to hold firm. The Germans are not just being pushed back, they are being annihilated. Dawson glances back at Monroe. The lieutenant doesn't smile. He doesn't even speak. He simply keeps his eyes forward, scanning the horizon. Every second counts. Every misstep could mean the difference between life and death. And for the Germans, every second is another step closer to collapse. The shock of the American advance spreads faster than the tanks themselves. Reports reach Corps headquarters that entire companies have surrendered en masse. Communication with some units is lost entirely. Officers are issuing contradictory orders in panic, unaware that their own men are abandoning positions. In the rear, Patton lights a cigar, watching the smoke drift lazily. The battlefield is alive, violent, chaotic, but under his command it is a precise machine of destruction. He has turned the Germans' laughter into fear, their mockery into chaos. Lorraine is falling under the weight of his armored columns, and the Germans have no idea how to stop it. And yet, for all the destruction, Patton knows the battle is not fully won. The Germans may still regroup. There are still hidden pockets of resistance, and one mistake could allow them to stabilize. But for now, the collapse is undeniable. The line that once seemed impenetrable is in ruins. German soldiers, once cocky and confident, are now scattered across the fields, their morale shattered. They had mocked the Americans, but the Americans have rewritten the rules of engagement. The first whispers reach Krause's headquarters. The American tanks aren't just advancing. They are everywhere at once. The Germans' plans, their strategies, their pride, they are all gone. The morning that began with laughter is ending in panic. The Germans cannot believe what they are seeing. The Sherman tanks they once called fragile toys are unstoppable, and the man behind them, Patton, has transformed mockery into the nightmare they never imagined. And as the sun climbs higher, casting long shadows across the ruined fields of Lorraine, one question hangs in the air among the fleeing Germans. How did they do this? By late afternoon, the battlefield is a blur of mud, smoke, and fire. Lorraine's farmland has been transformed into a war-torn canvas. Tank tracks carve deep ruts in fields once dotted with grazing cattle. Every hedgerow, every farmhouse bears scars of combat. And through it all, Patton's armored columns surge forward, relentless and coordinated. In the middle of the chaos, Lieutenant Monroe steers his Sherman through a shattered village. Smoke and dust choke the air. The sound of shells exploding is constant, punctuated by the staccato rattle of machine guns. Dawson peers over the turret rim. German infantry appears briefly from behind walls, then disappears under the suppressive fire of American tanks. Every move is calculated, every advance synchronized with artillery, infantry, and flanking Shermans. At this moment, the full brilliance of Patton's strategy becomes clear. Unlike traditional engagements, where units grind against each other head-on, he has created a moving, living front. Sherman tanks aren't just attacking, they are enveloping, flanking, and pressuring simultaneously. The Germans find themselves outmaneuvered at every turn, trapped between wedges of advancing armor and hidden artillery strikes. From the command post, Patton paces behind a wooden table covered in maps and reports. Cigar smoke curls in the air as he studies the positions of German forces. Every time a report comes in, burned Panther here, surrendered Panzer IV there, his eyes gleam. He knows that this is more than a tactical victory. This is psychological warfare. The Germans thought they were masters of armored warfare. They thought they could mock the Americans. Now, that hubris is their undoing. Back on the field, German officers are panicked. Major Krauss, desperate, attempts to reorganize a retreating unit. "Form a line, hold them," he shouts, but his men ignore him, scattering into woods and along ruined roads. A Panther commander, flames licking his tank, abandons the vehicle mid-battle. Soldiers scramble to salvage what they can, but the Americans have blocked their routes. It's chaos. And then Patton's secret weapon, the speed of his advance, becomes deadly. While the Germans struggle to regroup, American tanks are already appearing where they never expected, cutting off escape routes, driving panic into every unit. Lorraine has become a labyrinth of destruction, and the Americans navigate it with precision. A young German sergeant, huddled in a ruined barn, witnesses a Sherman rolling through the main street of a nearby village. Its tracks crush rubble. Its 75 cannon fires at buildings where German infantry tried to hide. He watches in disbelief, muttering, "They can't be everywhere," and yet they are. The reality sinks in for the German command. This is no ordinary armored push. Patton's columns are not just moving fast, they are coordinated to perfection. Every Sherman tank, every artillery battery, every infantry unit works in unison. Nothing the Germans attempt can halt the advance. By dusk, entire divisions are in retreat or surrendering. The mockery that began hours earlier, the laughter at weak Shermans, is gone. In its place, disbelief, fear, chaos. The Germans are forced to abandon positions, vehicles, and sometimes entire battalions. Patton's mastery of maneuver warfare has rewritten the battle. And in the midst of this destruction, a message reaches Patton's command post. Intelligence reports that hundreds of German soldiers have surrendered in small groups. Field Marshal von Rundstedt's communications are frantically ordering units to regroup, but the Americans are already 3 miles ahead. The Germans are chasing ghosts they cannot catch. Patton leans over the map one last time. He knows this battle will be studied for years. How a general turned ridicule into victory through speed, coordination, and audacity. The Americans did not simply defeat the Germans at a racord. They humiliated them, breaking the line and shattering morale in one decisive stroke. The smoke clears slightly as the sun dips toward the horizon. Sherman tanks still rumble through the fields, engines growling, headlights cutting through the dust. The shattered remnants of the German line stagger back toward Metz and Nancy, battered and bewildered. And Patton, he stands outside the command post, cigar in hand, watching the tanks move like chess pieces across Lorraine. He knows the Germans laughed this morning. They mocked his Shermans. They believed in their Panthers and Tigers. By nightfall, however, the laughter has ended. The Americans have shown them what happens when speed, firepower, and audacity collide. Lorraine has been broken, and the legend of Patton only just beginning. Night falls over Lorraine, and the fields are eerily quiet. Smoke still rises from burned-out tanks. The scent of cordite, oil, and scorched earth lingers in the cold air. The echoes of battle, the explosions, the shouts, the engine roars, have faded, leaving only the remnants of destruction and the terrified whispers of retreating German soldiers. On the American side, crews are exhausted. Dawson wipes soot from his face, ears ringing from constant gunfire. Monroe closes the turret hatch, shaking with adrenaline. Around them, the Sherman tanks sit in the mud, engines idling, crews exchanging looks that say more than words ever could. They survived. They advanced. They conquered. And they did it with the very tanks that the Germans had mocked just hours ago. Behind the lines, Patton's staff begins compiling reports, casualty figures, vehicles lost, strategic gains. Maps are marked with arrows showing the disintegration of German defenses. The victory is decisive. Entire German units have retreated, surrendering or abandoning equipment. Lorraine is open. The advance toward the Saar and the Rhine can continue. But the real victory is psychological. German commanders, once laughing at what they thought were inferior American machines, now report fear, confusion, and disbelief. Field Marshal von Rundstedt writes urgently to Berlin, "The Americans move like phantoms. Their armor is relentless. Our lines are collapsing under a force we did not anticipate." In Metz, intelligence officers scramble to make sense of what happened. The Sherman tanks, labeled as underpowered and expendable, have proven devastating in the right hands. The mockery has turned into panic. Lorraine will be remembered not just for the ground lost, but for the shock and disbelief that Patton inflicted on an army that considered itself invincible. Patton himself, ever the showman and strategist, already plans the next push. He knows momentum is everything. The Germans are shaken, the Americans are confident. Lorraine has been broken not only by speed and firepower, but by daring, by coordination, and by the unrelenting pressure of Patton's vision. Stories of the battle begin to circulate among troops. How Sherman tanks, inferior in the eyes of the enemy, rolled forward in disciplined wedges, coordinated with artillery, and forced German units to surrender or retreat in chaos. How Patton's strategy turned mockery into a masterstroke. Soldiers speak of the thunder of engines, the flash of cannon fire, and the smell of mud and smoke, details that textbooks cannot capture. For the Germans, the humiliation is bitter. Officers replay the images in their minds. Shermans advancing where they shouldn't, flanking attacks hitting positions they thought secure, their elite units retreating under pressure from a machine they had underestimated. Confidence shattered, they now view the Americans with a mixture of fear and awe. For Patton, the legend grows. Lorraine becomes another testament to his daring approach, aggressive, audacious, and relentless. The Sherman tanks, once ridiculed, are now symbols of American ingenuity and courage. And the soldiers who manned them, heroes who turned ridicule into victory, fear into momentum, and a mocked advance into one of the most celebrated armored victories of the war. As dawn rises the next morning, the fields of Lorraine are silent but scarred. Burned tanks, shattered hedgerows, and scattered equipment tell the story of a battle that began with laughter and ended in panic. The Americans march on, their confidence reinforced, their momentum unstoppable. And somewhere in the minds of the German commanders who once laughed, there is a chilling realization. The Americans, led by Patton, are unlike anything they have faced. They cannot be underestimated, they cannot be mocked, and they will not stop. The legend of Patton, and of the Sherman tank that carried mockery into fear, is written not in books or reports, but across the very fields of Lorraine, in mud, smoke, and steel. And